Imagine a grand hall filled with mirrors. In each reflection, you see the same face, staring back with an insatiable hunger for adoration. This is the world of the tyrant, a world they build for themselves. 2,000 years of history separate the Roman Emperor Nero from the American President Donald Trump, yet their reflections seem to merge in this hall. They are two men from vastly different worlds, one of marble and toga, the other of steel and television. But if you look closely, their stories echo one another. They both sat upon a metaphorical golden throne, a seat of immense power that they believed was not a responsibility, but a stage for their own personal glory. Their legacies are a powerful reminder that the patterns of power, ambition, and ego are timeless, repeating themselves across centuries. This essay explores the strange and unsettling parallels between these two powerful figures. We will journey back to the grandeur and chaos of ancient Rome and then fly across time to the turbulent political landscape of the 21st century. We will see how both Nero and Trump seized power in dramatic fashion, using charisma and spectacle to capture the public's imagination. Their leadership was not about serving the people, but about making the people serve their image. They turned governance into a performance, with themselves as the star, director, and sole beneficiary. History, it seems, does not just rhyme. Sometimes it sings the same haunting song, warning us of the dangers when one man's ego becomes the destiny of a nation. The Golden Throne is more than just a piece of furniture. It is a symbol. For Nero, it was the real, physical seat of an emperor, inherited through a web of family intrigue and political maneuvering. For Trump, it was the Oval Office, a room he famously redecorated with opulent gold curtains, transforming a symbol of democratic leadership into something that felt more like a personal palace. Both men viewed their position not as a sacred trust, but as the ultimate prize in a game they were determined to win at all costs. They saw the world as an extension of themselves, a place to be molded, branded, and conquered. This shared vision is the key to understanding their reigns and the chaos they left in their wake. As we dissect their stories, we will see how their personal weaknesses, their deep-seated narcissism, their desperate need for constant praise, and their furious reactions to any form of criticism shaped their political actions. These were not just character flaws. They were the engines of their rule. They attacked the very institutions designed to limit their power, from the Roman Senate to the American judiciary. They used lies as a tool to control public opinion, shifting blame for their own failures onto scapegoats. Their stories are a chilling case study in how a leader's psychology can infect an entire society, leaving scars that last long after they are gone from the stage. Nero's path to power was paved with ambition, but it was not his own at first. He was the son of Agrippina the Younger, a woman with a ferocious desire for influence. Through her strategic marriage to the Emperor Claudius, she maneuvered her young son Nero into the line of succession. He was not a soldier or a seasoned politician. He was a teenager interested in music, poetry, and theater. When Claudius died, rumored to have been poisoned, the 17-year-old Nero was proclaimed emperor by the Praetorian Guard. He rose to the most powerful position in the world not through merit or conquest, but through palace intrigue and his mother's ruthless planning. It was a dramatic and shocking beginning, placing immense authority into the hands of an untested and immature youth. Donald Trump's rise was just as dramatic, and to many, just as improbable. He was not a general or a governor. He was a real estate mogul, and more importantly, a reality television star. His fame was his primary qualification. He used his mastery of media and his populist slogan, "Make America Great Again," to build a powerful connection with millions of voters who felt forgotten by the political establishment. He bypassed traditional political structures, using rallies and social media to speak directly to his followers. Like Nero, He was an outsider to the political class who seized the ultimate prize. His victory in 2016 sent shockwaves through the world, proving that in the modern age, celebrity could be a more potent force than political experience. The initial moments of their rule were telling. Nero, at first, seemed to promise a new golden age, guided by his wise advisors, Seneca and Burrus. He spoke of respecting the Senate and ruling with fairness. However, this moderation did not last long. His desire for absolute control and personal indulgence soon overshadowed any pretense of collaborative governance. He quickly grew tired of anyone who challenged him, including his own mother, whom he eventually had executed. His ascent was a classic story of a figurehead who, upon tasting true power, decided he no longer wanted to share the stage with his creators or his mentors, setting a dark precedent for the years to come. Similarly, Trump's presidency began with promises to drain the swamp and serve the common person, but it quickly became clear that his primary focus was loyalty to himself. He surrounded himself with family members and loyalists, and those who dared to dissent were publicly ridiculed and often fired. His administration was marked by a revolving door of cabinet members, as anyone who questioned his authority was cast aside. Just as Nero disposed of his advisors, Trump purged his administration of anyone who was not a true believer. The ascent of both men was not just about gaining power, it was about consolidating it in a deeply personal way, ensuring that no one could stand between them and their desires. After the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE devastated the city, Nero saw not a tragedy, but an opportunity. On the scorched earth where countless citizens had lost their homes, he began construction of his most extravagant project, the Domus Aurea, or House of Gold. This was not just a palace. It was a sprawling private city covering over 120 acres in the heart of Rome. It featured an artificial lake, vineyards, pastures with herds of animals, and rooms decorated with gold, jewels, and mother-of-pearl. At the entrance stood a colossal 120-foot-tall bronze statue of himself, the Colossus of Nero. He was literally rebuilding the capital of the world in his own image, a monument to his ego built upon the ashes of his people's suffering. Centuries later, Donald Trump used a different kind of material, steel, glass, and gold-plated fixtures, to achieve a similar effect. Long before he became president, his name was his brand, emblazoned in giant letters on skyscrapers, hotels, casinos, and golf courses. Trump Tower in New York, with its lavish gold-toned interior and famous escalator, became a symbol of 1980s excess and a monument to his own success. When he entered the White House, he brought this aesthetic with him, famously clashing with tradition. He sought to demolish a historic White House wing to build a new, grander ballroom, a modern echo of Nero's desire to reshape his capital to better suit his personal taste for opulence and grandeur. The psychological drive behind these projects is remarkably similar. For both Nero and Trump, building was not just about creating structures. It was about asserting dominance over their environment and ensuring their legacy. Nero's Domus Aurea was a declaration that Rome belonged to him. It was a physical manifestation of his belief that his pleasure and comfort were more important than the public good. The project was so vast and so self-indulgent that it alienated the Roman elite and burdened the treasury, contributing to the growing resentment against his rule. He was not just an emperor, he was a god in his own mind, and his palace was his earthly heaven. Donald Trump's obsession with branding served the same purpose. By putting his name on everything, he made himself ubiquitous, a constant presence in the landscape of commerce and later, politics. His buildings were not just properties, they were advertisements for himself. This impulse continued into his presidency, where everything from official documents to challenge coins was stamped with his signature. This deep need to see their own image and name reflected everywhere reveals a profound insecurity, a fear of being forgotten. Both Nero and Trump used brick, mortar, and gold to fight against the one thing they feared most: irrelevance. They were building fortresses not against enemies, but against anonymity. For a ruler obsessed with his own image, simply building monuments is not enough. The next logical step is to rename the world itself. Nero, in a fit of supreme grandiosity, proposed to rename the city of Rome Neropolis. This was the ultimate act of possession, an attempt to erase over 700 years of history and refound the eternal city in his own name. He didn't just want to rule Rome, he wanted to be Rome. He also renamed the month of April, calling it Neronius, inserting himself directly into the calendar and the daily lives of his subjects. Every time someone stated the date, they would be forced to speak his name. It was a powerful and audacious attempt to achieve immortality by weaving his identity into the fabric of time itself. This impulse to rebrand reality found a modern counterpart in Donald Trump. While he did not officially rename a city or a month, his entire career was built on the power of his name. The Trump brand was licensed for everything from steaks to universities, creating a commercial empire built on a single word. In the political realm, this took on a new dimension. His supporters wore hats and flew flags bearing his name, turning a political movement into a personality cult. In July 2025, during his second term, a loyalist congressman, Andy Ogles, even introduced a bill to add Donald Trump's face to Mount Rushmore, an idea Trump himself had publicly entertained. The goal was the same as Nero's, to carve his image into the very landscape of the nation, ensuring he would be remembered alongside its founders. This desire to stamp one's name on the world is more than just vanity, it is a political strategy. It conflates the identity of the leader with the identity of the state. To criticize Neropolis would be to criticize Nero himself. To oppose a policy championed by Trump was, in the eyes of his most ardent followers, to oppose America itself. This branding creates a powerful in-group and out-group dynamic. You are either with the leader, and therefore with the nation, or you are against him, and therefore a traitor. It simplifies complex political debates into a simple test of personal loyalty, a tactic that both rulers use to consolidate their power and isolate their opponents. Ultimately, this effort is a desperate grasp for control over one's own narrative. Both Nero and Trump understood the power of symbols. They knew that if their name was everywhere, it would be harder to erase them from history. Nero's attempt to rename Rome failed, and after his death, the Senate made every effort to remove his name and statues from public view. Yet the ambition behind the act is what remains so striking. It reveals a leader who sees the state not as a republic of citizens, but as personal property. For both men, the nation was the ultimate branding opportunity, the largest canvas on which to paint their own name in glittering gold letters for all of eternity. When the Great Fire of Rome raged for 6 days, it destroyed a significant part of the city. Rumors quickly spread that Emperor Nero himself was responsible. Some claimed he started the fire to clear land for his new palace, while others told stories of him playing his lyre on a hilltop, composing a song about the fall of Troy as his own city burned. Whether true or not, Nero was facing a public relations disaster. He needed a scapegoat, and he found one in a small, misunderstood religious sect, the Christians. He publicly accused them of starting the fire, turning the public's anger away from himself and onto a vulnerable minority group. This was a masterful, if monstrous, act of political theater. This strategy of deflecting blame through fabricated narratives is a classic tool of autocratic leaders. In the 21st century, Donald Trump demonstrated a similar talent for controlling the story. During his first term, he made thousands of documented false or misleading claims, creating an alternate reality for his followers. After the violent attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, which was carried out by his supporters attempting to overturn the election, Trump and his allies immediately began to construct a new narrative. They falsely blamed the violence on left-wing agitators like Antifa, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Just as Nero used the Christians, Trump used an external enemy to absolve his own movement of responsibility. The public spectacles that followed Nero's accusation were designed for maximum impact. He staged cruel and elaborate public executions of the Christians. They were torn apart by dogs, crucified, or coated in tar, and set ablaze to serve as human torches to illuminate his garden parties. These horrific displays were not just punishments. They were a form of mass communication. They sent a clear message to the Roman populace. This is the enemy, and I am your protector who is dealing with them. The gruesome theater served to solidify the lie in the public imagination, making it more real and more terrifying than any whispered rumor about the emperor's own culpability. In the modern era, the theater of lies is performed on television and social media. Instead of public executions, there are relentless media appearances, rallies, and floods of online posts that repeat the same falsehoods until they take on the appearance of truth. Trump's claims about a stolen election were not a single statement, but a sustained campaign across multiple platforms, designed to erode faith in the democratic process itself. The goal, like Nero's, was to create a simple, emotionally powerful story that identified a clear villain and positioned the leader as the hero fighting against them. For both rulers, truth was never a priority. It was simply another tool to be manipulated in the service of power. Beyond the public spectacles and grand pronouncements, the reigns of both Nero and Trump were haunted by dark secrets and scandals that festered behind closed doors. For Nero, the whispers were of familial violence and unchecked cruelty. He was widely believed to have orchestrated the murder of his own mother, Agrippina, and his first wife, Octavia, to consolidate his power and free himself for another marriage. He also kicked his pregnant second wife, Poppaea, to death in a fit of rage. These were not political purges, but deeply personal acts of violence, revealing a man devoid of empathy and ruled by impulsive brutality. These dark deeds, though known to the Roman elite, were hidden from the public by the immense power he wielded. For Donald Trump, the most persistent and damaging whispers have revolved around his long-standing connection to the disgraced financier and convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. Trump's own words from a 2002 interview, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy," have echoed through the years, tying him to one of the most sordid scandals of the modern era. The release of new Epstein files after 2023 kept the controversy alive, fueling public suspicion and scrutiny. French Senator Claude Malhuret, in a scathing 2026 speech, went so far as to accuse Trump of being a pedophile desperately exploiting his role as commander-in-chief, suggesting a pattern of distraction through military action whenever the scandal resurfaced. These hidden scandals create a climate of fear and paranoia within a ruler's inner circle. In Nero's court, no one was safe. Advisors, rivals, and even family members who were perceived as threats were forced to commit suicide or were summarily executed. The atmosphere was one of constant anxiety, where loyalty was the only currency, and even that was no guarantee of survival. Nero's paranoia grew over time, leading him to trust fewer and fewer people until he was surrounded only by those who would never dare to question him. This isolation only fueled his worst impulses, as he was cut off from any moderating influence or honest counsel. Similarly, the controversies surrounding Trump have created a toxic political environment. Allegations of corruption and self-enrichment have been constant. Republican donor Ken Griffin stated in 2026 that Trump's administration was very, very enriching for his own family. Senator Malhuret pointed to a $400 million Boeing jet gifted by Qatar as an example of conflicts of interest that would trigger impeachment in other countries. These whispers and accusations, whether of personal misconduct or financial corruption, force a leader into a defensive crouch. They see enemies everywhere and become obsessed with attacking the sources of these stories: the press, intelligence agencies, and political opponents, further destabilizing the very government they lead. A tyrant's greatest enemies are the institutions designed to constrain him and the truth that exposes him. Nero waged a slow, deliberate war against the Roman Senate, the traditional heart of the Republic's power. In his early years, he paid it lip service, but as his reign progressed, he treated it with increasing contempt. He purged senators who disagreed with him, bringing treason charges against anyone who dared to challenge his authority. Ultimately, fearing a conspiracy, he effectively dissolved the body, relying instead on his own whims and a small circle of sycophants. By attacking the Senate, Nero was attacking the last vestiges of the old Roman Republic, replacing a system of shared governance with one-man rule. Donald Trump's presidency was defined by a similar, relentless assault on the institutions of American democracy. He attacked the judiciary, calling judges who ruled against him fools and lapdogs, particularly after a 2026 Supreme Court ruling against his tariffs. He targeted the FBI and the Department of Justice, portraying them as part of a deep state conspiracy to undermine him. His rhetoric culminated in the incitement of the January 6th mob, a direct physical assault on the U.S. Capitol, the very seat of legislative power. During his second term, which began in 2025, he ensured his cabinet was composed almost exclusively of loyalists, creating an echo chamber where dissent was impossible. This war on institutions is always accompanied by a war on the people who represent them. Nero did not just disagree with his advisors like Seneca, he forced them into suicide. He saw dissent not as a difference of opinion, but as a personal betrayal. Any senator or general who gained too much popularity was seen as a threat to his own preeminence. His rule became a long and bloody process of eliminating anyone with an independent power base or a critical voice. This created a government that could not function properly, as competence and experience were replaced by blind obedience and flattery. Trump followed a strikingly similar pattern. He publicly demeaned and fired a long list of officials who he felt were disloyal, from his Attorney General to his Secretary of Defense. The French Senator Claude Malhuret described Trump's 2025 cabinet as a circus, filled with unqualified and chaotic figures like an alcoholic TV host as defense secretary and a groupie of Putin for national intelligence. This practice of prioritizing personal loyalty over expertise is not just poor management. It is a deliberate strategy to weaken the institutions of government from within, making them extensions of the leader's will rather than independent bodies serving the public. The goal is to leave the tyrant as the only source of authority left standing. Beneath the gold-plated armor of every tyrant lies a deeply fragile ego. Both Nero and Trump exhibit the classic traits of what psychologists call narcissistic personality disorder, an inflated sense of self-importance, a pathological need for admiration, and a shocking lack of empathy for others. This psychological profile is not a footnote to their stories. It is the central driving force. For them, the world is a mirror, and they fly into a rage if the reflection is anything less than perfect. Their grandiosity is a defense mechanism, a wall built to protect a fragile core that cannot bear criticism or failure. This explains their obsessive need to be the center of every conversation and the subject of every headline. Nero's need for admiration was all-consuming. He considered himself a world-class artist, a poet, a singer, and a lyre player. He forced the public and the Senate to attend his lengthy recitals, where no one was allowed to leave, even if they were sick or bored. He competed in the Olympic Games in Greece, entering every contest and, unsurprisingly, winning every prize. This was not the hobby of an emperor. It was a desperate quest for validation. He didn't want to be respected as a ruler. He wanted to be adored as a star. When people failed to applaud enthusiastically enough, he would become sullen or angry. revealing the insecurity that lurked just beneath the surface of his imperial power. Donald Trump's career has been a modern masterclass in demanding attention. From his days as a tabloid fixture in New York to his use of Twitter as a presidential bullhorn, he has shown an insatiable appetite for the spotlight. His rallies are not just political events, they are spectacles of adulation where he basks in the cheers of his supporters. Like Nero, he is hypersensitive to criticism. He has famously lashed out at comedians who mock him, news outlets that question him, and politicians who challenge him. His constant claims of having the best words, the biggest crowds, and the most successful economy are not just political boasts. They are the verbal tics of a man terrified of being seen as second best. This profound immaturity, when combined with immense power, is a recipe for disaster. One scholar described Trump as an old, immature man, a label that could just as easily be applied to Nero. Their decisions were often driven not by strategy or ideology, but by personal pique and the need to soothe their wounded pride. A negative news story could trigger a chaotic policy shift. A perceived slight from another world leader could endanger an alliance. Their leadership was, in essence, the public acting out of their private psychological dramas, with the fate of millions hanging on the whims of their fragile self-esteem. The grand ambitions and fragile egos of rulers like Nero and Trump always come at a steep price, and it is the ordinary people who are forced to pay it. Nero's lavish spending on his Domus Aurea and his extravagant lifestyle placed an immense strain on the Roman treasury. To fund his projects, he took a drastic step. He debased the currency. He reduced the amount of precious metal in the empire's coins, a move that led to rampant inflation. The money in people's pockets became worth less and less. While the emperor lived in unparalleled luxury, the citizens of Rome faced economic hardship and uncertainty, a direct consequence of their leaders' self-indulgence. Donald Trump's rule also brought economic chaos, though through different means. He launched aggressive trade wars, imposing chaotic and unpredictable tariffs on goods from around the world. He believed these actions would strengthen the American economy, but they often led to retaliatory tariffs, supply chain disruptions, and higher prices for consumers. After the Supreme Court ruled against one of his tariff policies in 2026, he defiantly imposed a new 15% global tariff under a different legal pretense, boldly stating, "I can destroy the trade, I can destroy the country." This statement revealed a frightening willingness to inflict widespread economic pain to assert his own authority, regardless of the consequences for his people. Beyond the economy, the mismanagement of crises highlights the human cost of narcissistic leadership. When the Great Fire broke out, Nero's initial response was slow and inadequate. His subsequent focus on his own palace project instead of a comprehensive rebuilding plan for the displaced citizens demonstrated a profound lack of empathy. He saw the disaster through the lens of his own opportunity, not his people's suffering. The scapegoating of Christians was a further cruelty, inflicting horrific violence on an innocent community to protect his own reputation. His priorities were clear. His image and his comfort came first, and the welfare of the Roman people came a distant second. In the 21st century, the COVID-19 pandemic provided a stark test of leadership that many argue Trump failed. His administration was criticized for downplaying the virus's severity, promoting unproven treatments, and politicizing public health measures like mask wearing. This approach sowed confusion and division at a time when clear, unified guidance was desperately needed. Similarly, his second-term cabinet appointments, like an anti-vaxxer health minister, continued to prioritize political loyalty over scientific expertise, with potentially devastating consequences for public health. For both Nero and Trump, a national crisis became yet another stage for political performance, where the lives of their citizens were secondary to the narrative they wished to project. The end for a tyrant is almost always a lonely one. As Nero's rule became more erratic and his purges more widespread, the support he once enjoyed began to crumble. The armies on the frontiers grew restless, and the governors of the provinces began to rebel. The Senate, which he had long despised, finally found its courage and declared him a public enemy. Faced with arrest and certain execution, Nero fled Rome in disguise. He was abandoned by his once loyal Praetorian Guard and forced to hide in a ditch on the outskirts of the city. Unable to bring himself to take his own life, he had to be assisted by his secretary. His final words were said to be, "What an artist dies in me." He died alone, abandoned, a tragic figure stripped of all his power and glory. While Donald Trump's story is still being written, many historians and commentators predict a similar trajectory of isolation. His second term has been marked by plummeting approval ratings, which stood at just 35% in April 2026. His attacks on institutions and his chaotic international policies have alienated allies both at home and abroad. Commentators like Gideon Rachman of the Financial Times suggested in 2026 that Trump's presidency is increasingly likely to be viewed by history as a grotesque aberration. The downfall may not be as physically dramatic as Nero's, but the political and social isolation could be just as profound. He risks becoming a man surrounded only by the echoes of his own voice and the golden reflections of his own name. After Nero's death, the Roman people and the new emperor Vespasian made a symbolic gesture to erase his legacy. They buried his extravagant Domus Aurea and built a massive public amphitheater on the site of his artificial lake, the Colosseum. They returned the land he had stolen back to the people of Rome. The colossal statue of Nero was altered to represent the sun god, Sol, and eventually torn down. It was a conscious effort to reclaim the city from the memory of a tyrant and to turn a monument of private indulgence into a space for public enjoyment. History's judgment was swift and severe. The lesson from these two lives, separated by 2 millennia, is a stark and enduring warning. When a society allows a leader to become more important than the institutions he leads, when charisma is valued over character, and when lies are accepted as truth, the path is set for ruin. The fall of such a leader is inevitable, but the damage they inflict can last for generations. The stories of Nero and Trump serve as a mirror for our own times, forcing us to ask whether we are learning from the past or are doomed to repeat it. History watches, waiting to see if we will remember the lesson of the empty, lonely throne.